Hey everyone, welcome back. We love diving deep into these tougher topics, and today we're tackling one that's come up a lot in your requests.
Yeah, it's a big one.
The link between autism and abandonment trauma. We found a super insightful article from Cheap ABA.
Understanding autism and abandonment trauma. It's a great starting point.
Absolutely. And our goal, not just throwing definitions around, it's
Right.
about how these experiences can really hit differently for someone on the spectrum. And most importantly, what can actually help. Practical support, healing, all that.
Love that approach.
So, first things first, maybe we should just define abandonment trauma.
Good place to start.
Because I feel like it's one of those things people think they get, but
Yeah, it's deeper than it sounds.
way deeper.
It's more than just like physical separation.
Right.
It's this profound sense of loss, losing connection,
Whoa.
losing support, especially from someone you depend on, for emotional security. Like, imagine feeling like the ground's constantly shifting beneath you. That instability, that uncertainty can be incredibly overwhelming for anyone.
And I can only imagine how much tougher that must be for someone on the spectrum.
Absolutely. The article points out folks with autism, they often have this heightened anxiety around social stuff, sensory input, changes in routine.
All those things we've talked about before.
Exactly. So you layer on the emotional turmoil of abandonment trauma,
Yeah.
it gets really challenging to process.
It's like trying to solve a puzzle, but pieces are missing, and someone's blasting music in your ear. Chaos.
That's such a good analogy.
You're right.
The article actually lists some specific scenarios that can trigger this trauma. And, it's not always the obvious stuff.
Oh, okay. Give us the rundown.
So it can even be triggered by physical separation, even if it's temporary. Like,
Yeah.
think about a hospitalization. Even that can be enough to set it off. And then there's inconsistent responses from caregivers. So sometimes the support is there, sometimes it's not.
Oh, that makes so much sense. It's that unpredictability.
Exactly. Like, is the rug going to get pulled out from under me? When?
Always on edge. And then, of course, the death of a loved one.
Huge trigger. Absolutely.
Yeah. But why are these situations especially difficult, potent, whatever the right word is, for autistic individuals?
Well, think about it. If you're already struggling with emotional processing, right? Social communication, understanding cues, expressions.
All that's extra work.
Exactly. Now try processing loss or separation. It's a whole other level.
It's like being handed a rule book that's in a language you barely know, and pages are missing.
Exactly. You're already working harder to decode things.
So we've got these unique sensitivities layered on top of potential triggers. What's the outward result? How does the trauma show up?
It's not just sadness or feeling down. We're talking increased anxiety, struggles with forming new attachments.
So it impacts relationships moving forward.
Big time. Difficulty regulating emotions and this deep, core fear of rejection.
So it permeates everything, internally and how they interact with the world.
Exactly. And here's where it gets interesting. That fear of rejection, it can manifest in almost opposite ways. Some folks become people pleasers,
Oh,
constantly seeking approval. Because if everyone's happy with them, they won't be abandoned.
making themselves indispensable. Wow.
But then on the flip side, some people just avoid relationships entirely. They've been hurt, so walls up, protect themselves.
Heartbreaking, though, because that isolation, it just compounds the issue.
It does. And the article highlights this too. Abandonment trauma, it can really damage self-worth. They start to believe I'm unlovable or I'm flawed, and that makes healing, forming healthy attachments, so much harder.
It's like trying to build a house on sand. You need that solid foundation of self-worth to be resilient, right?
Perfect analogy.
Okay, so we've got the what and the why of abandonment trauma.
The basics.
But now, let's shift gears to the how. How can we actually support someone going through this?
Good news is there are strategies that help. The article outlines some really practical approaches.
Perfect. Actionable knowledge, that's what our listeners want. So hit me with step one.
Creating a haven of safety, predictability, and routine is key why for that.
Routine, yeah, especially for folks on the spectrum, I imagine.
Absolutely. It reduces anxiety, builds that sense of security. But it's not just about having the routine. You got to communicate it clearly, too.
So no springing surprise changes on someone.
Exactly. Got to be thoughtful about how we introduce new things or alter existing patterns. And remember, communication isn't just words.
Right.
Visual aids, schedules, timers, social stories. Make it concrete.
Meeting people where they're at with the tools that work for them.
Love it.
Okay, what else is in the article's arsenal?
Open communication about emotions. Big one.
Makes sense.
Creating that safe space where someone feels they can express how they feel without judgment, without fear of rejection.
That safety is everything, where being vulnerable isn't just accepted, it's encouraged. And being an active listener, right? Not just hearing the words.
Feeling the emotions behind them, validating them.
That validation piece, I bet it's huge, especially if you've felt dismissed, misunderstood for a long time.
Absolutely. To have someone finally acknowledge, hey, what you're feeling is real, it's valid, that's powerful.
Being seen, being heard.
And the article suggests ways to encourage this beyond just talking. Journaling, art therapy,
Oh, I love that.
even using an object to represent feelings during a conversation, like a little teddy bear or something.
That's brilliant. It gives them something to focus on, makes it less intimidating to open up. Seems like the article's really pushing for emotional literacy.
Totally. Both for the individual and those supporting them.
Right, makes sense.
And a big part of that is self-awareness. Teaching someone to identify their own emotions. Again, visual aids can help here.
Like those charts with the faces and different emotions.
Exactly. But it's more than labeling. It's when I feel angry, what does my body feel like?
Oh, connecting the internal to the physical.
My face gets hot, I want to stomp my feet. That connection is powerful.
It's like learning the language of your own emotions so you
Yeah.
can communicate better with yourself and others.
Precisely. And that's where modeling healthy relationships becomes so crucial. Caregivers, loved ones, huge role here.
Because you can tell someone how to have a good relationship, but
Showing them is different.
night and day.
Exactly. Walk the walk. How do you communicate clearly? How do you respect boundaries, show empathy, even when you disagree? Those lessons stick.
It's like giving them a blueprint, something to internalize and hopefully build on. And speaking of modeling, what about emotional regulation?
Huge. The article talks about how managing intense feelings, it's a real struggle for folks who've experienced this trauma. Understandably so. But there are tools. Mindfulness, relaxation techniques.
Giving them a toolkit to ride those emotional waves.
Exactly. Deep breathing, guided imagery, even progressive muscle relaxation. There's something for everyone.
Finding what works for you and practicing it. And speaking of things that take practice, the article also mentions fostering social connections, even with that fear of rejection we talked about.
Right. It's a tightrope walk. You're afraid of being hurt again, but connection is so important. The article suggests groups, activities, but geared toward shared interests.
So finding your passion and letting that be the bridge.
Exactly. Provides a natural point of connection. Low-pressure way to practice social skills.
Baby steps, building that confidence over time.
Precisely. And building those relationships is not just filling a void, it's creating a support network. People who understand, encourage, make you feel like you belong.
Which is like the antidote to that feeling of abandonment we've been talking about.
Right, exactly. It's
Get it?
about being around people who remind you you're not alone. You're worthy of love and connection. And speaking of support, sometimes you need professional guidance.
Oh, absolutely. The article's really clear about that. Therapists who specialize in trauma and autism, they can provide that individual support, especially when things get complicated. It's not a one-size-fits-all thing.
Nope, not at all.
Mm.
It's about finding the right tools for that person.
Like you wouldn't try to fix a leaky faucet without the right tools.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You'd call a plumber who knows what they're doing.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
when we're dealing with something as complex as abandonment trauma, you want those skilled professionals on your team.
100%. And it's not just about the person who experienced the trauma either.
Oh, good point.
Therapists can help. Caregivers, loved ones too, help them create that safe, nurturing environment.
It's a team effort. It takes a village. So big picture, what are the key takeaways here for our listeners?
Well, first off, abandonment trauma is real. It's valid. And it can have a profound impact on autistic individuals. Don't minimize it. It needs a compassionate, informed response.
Couldn't agree more. We have to recognize those unique challenges, right? Processing emotions, navigating social situations, building those relationships.
And once we understand that, we can tailor our strategies. We've talked about creating that safe, predictable environment, open communication.
Modeling healthy relationships.
Right. And that professional support.
Huge. Therapists who get it.
It's knowing when to call in the experts and not being afraid to ask for help.
And remembering healing isn't a destination.
Oh, it's a journey, for sure.
Takes time, patience, meeting someone where they're at.
Love that phrase. Meeting someone where they are. It's so important. Everyone's journey is different.
Exactly. And progress isn't always linear.
Oh, there are going to be setbacks.
Ups and downs. But celebrating every step forward, no matter how small,
Being kind to yourself.
and to the people we're supporting. Embracing the messiness of it all.
Because even in the messy parts,
Yeah.
there's hope.
And speaking of hope, I think the article itself is hopeful, right? It gives concrete strategies, tools that actually work. It's not just, here's the problem, it's, here's what you can do.
Empowering people.
Yes. And I think that's key. Understanding all this lets us respond better, more compassionately.
Creating a more supportive, understanding environment for autistic folks. That's the goal.
A world where everyone feels seen, heard, supported. Beautiful thought.
I agree. And remember, listener, you're not alone in this. There are resources, people who get it, a whole community ready to help.
You are not alone. That's so important for people to hear. There's hope. And with the right support, brighter days are ahead. But before we wrap up completely, I kind of want to leave folks with one final thought to chew on.
Ooh, I like where this is going. Hit me.
So we've talked about how abandonment trauma affects individuals, right?
Right.
But what about how society itself might contribute to these experiences?
Ooh, okay. I'm listening.
Think about it. Our world values independence, self-sufficiency, all that, which is great, but it can be tough for people who need more support, like a lot of folks on the spectrum.
Right, right.
And when those needs aren't met, you get isolation, you get, well, yeah, maybe even a sense of abandonment.
Not from one person, but like
From the system.
almost like societal abandonment. And I think that's a big piece of finding solutions. It's not just individual stuff. It's making society more inclusive, supportive overall.
Totally. And that starts with awareness, education, challenging our own biases. Like, what does normal even mean, right?
Right. Neurodiversity is not a deficit. It's just different. And it makes our world richer.
You know, that sense of belonging for neurodivergent folks, it goes hand in hand with this. If we create communities where everyone feels seen, heard, appreciated for who they are, that's powerful medicine against the isolation, the rejection.
Beautifully put. A world where everyone, regardless of neurotype, has the chance to thrive. That's the message for today.
Absolutely. And for anyone listening, if this resonates with you, you're not alone. There's help out there. There is. And don't be afraid to ask for it. Sometimes it's hard to even know what you need, let alone ask.
Exactly. But even just starting that conversation, it's a huge step.
It is. And to our listener, thanks for going on this journey with us. This stuff is heavy, but knowledge is power. And you've got a whole community behind you.
We do. Keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep advocating for yourself and others. We can create a more understanding, inclusive world, one step at a time.
Absolutely. Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive.
I think you're right. We've covered so much today, and I hope our listeners feel like they've got a better grasp on abandonment trauma, especially for autistic individuals.
More importantly, I hope they feel empowered to take action, whether that's seeking support for themselves or advocating for a more inclusive and understanding world for others. It all makes a difference.
It really does. So to our listener, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Remember, you're not alone. There's hope, and help is out there. Brighter days are ahead with the right support.
That's a perfect note to end on. Until next time, keep diving deep, keep those questions coming, and keep learning.
And keep believing in the power of connection and community. We're all in this together. It really does. And, sometimes the abandonment, it's not even intentional. It's just like a lack of awareness, a lack of support systems.
Right. We kind of touched on that earlier with the whole societal thing.
Exactly. And that's where advocacy comes in. We need to push for change, make sure autistic folks are getting the understanding and support they deserve.
100%. And that goes for everyone, really. If you see someone struggling, reach out, offer a kind word, a helping hand. You never know the impact you might have.
Absolutely. Small acts of kindness can go a long way. And sometimes that's all it takes to make someone feel seen, feel valued, to remind them they're not alone.
That's a powerful message to end on, I think. You're not alone. There's hope. And there's help out there.
There is. And remember, healing takes time. It's a process. Be patient with yourself. Celebrate the victories, no matter how small.
And never, ever give up hope. So to our listener, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We know this was a heavy topic, but knowledge is power. And you've got a whole community behind you.
We do. Keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep advocating for yourself and for others. We can create a more understanding, inclusive world one step at a time.
Absolutely. Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. We've covered so much today, and I hope you all feel like you've got a better understanding of abandonment trauma, especially in the context of autism.
More importantly, I hope you feel empowered to take action. whether that's seeking support for yourself or advocating for a more inclusive, understanding world for everyone.
It all makes a
It
difference.
truly does. So to our listeners, thank you so much for joining us. Remember, you're not alone. There's hope, and help is out there. Brighter days are ahead with the right support.
That's the perfect note to end on. Until next time, keep diving deep, keep those questions coming, and keep learning.
And keep believing in the power of connection and community. We're all in this together.